broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Helping Consumers Apply for Lifeline. This is a joint webinar with HUD and the FCC. We have a couple housekeeping items before we begin. First, my name is Katie Miller. I'm the Manager of Communications for Lifeline, and you'll hear my voice a little later in the presentation. If you can hear me now, you're already connected. There's going to be questions near the end of today's presentation, and so we encourage you to ask your questions at any point via the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Again, right-hand side of your screen, you can ask questions at any point, and we'll be monitoring and answering those as we get towards the end of today's presentation. We also have a handout available for you today that is also on the right-hand side of your screen under handouts, and it's available for download. So just click that, Helping Consumers Apply for Lifeline, and you will see that PDF downloaded onto your computer. So we have a couple speakers today, myself, Katie. We also have members of HUD leadership here. Ben DiMarzo is our Assistant Deputy Director of the Field Policy and Management Group at HUD, and he's going to be giving his opening remarks, followed by Micah Caldwell from the FCC. So Ben, I'm now going to unmute you and let you begin.
Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate it. I just want to welcome everyone today to our webinar co-hosted by HUD and the Federal Communications Commission. My name is Ben DiMarzo. I spoke to you on the last webinar. I'm the Assistant Deputy Secretary for HUD's Office of Field Policy and Management, which oversees our EnVision Centers demonstration. I want to thank you all again for your continued service and hard work out in America's communities. We appreciate everything that you're doing to serve the least fortunate. We really appreciate our partners at FCC and the Universal Service Administration Company for being able to talk to you today about Lifeline, which helps make telephone and broadband internet services more affordable and accessible for low-income consumers. Also, because of the content of today's webinar and everything we're going over, we extended the invitation to HUD's Connect Home Communities and our Office of Native American Programs and other partners and stakeholders. So I'd like to welcome all of you as well. So I think today's webinar is going to help enhance your current services by learning more about FCC's Lifeline program, as well as what they're doing for COVID-19 to help consumers access resources. So staying connected is critical to overcoming the digital divide that we talk about so often. So many services, healthcare, education, everything's moved online. So these services are especially important. So this webinar is part of HUD's efforts to connect our EnVision centers to these critical federal government resources. This is the 6th webinar this year. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two presenters. You already heard from Katie Miller. We have two presenters today from Federal Communications Commission and Universal Service Administrative Company. So Katie Miller, I will turn it over to you. Katie is a HUD alum. She was a Presidential Management Fellow here at HUD. So we always love having a HUD alum in other federal agencies helping our EnVision centers. So Katie, I'll turn it over to you.
Ben, thank you so much. We appreciate the invitation to speak with you and really appreciate your time introducing this important program today. So I'm now going to introduce Micah Caldwell. She is the Special Counsel in the Telecommunications Access Policy Division of the FCC in the Wireline Competition Bureau. So Micah.
Thanks, Katie. Took me a second to unmute myself. Happy to join the presentation today and happy to talk to you all about Lifeline. HUD, we appreciate your partnership as well, and we're excited to fill people in on how the Lifeline program works and how we can help low-income consumers get access to the program so that they can have connectivity to broadband and voice services, which, as you mentioned, are absolutely critical now in today's COVID-19 world where everything's moved online. People are working from home, people need access to telehealth, and people need to stay connected to their friends and families as well. So we're pleased to be able to present for you all today. I'm going to start us off and just give a very quick overview of the Lifeline program, and then I'm going to turn things over to Katie Miller to get into the details. So Katie, would you mind progressing to the next slide? So for our agenda today, the first bullet, the overview, I will give that, and then Katie is going to walk us through the application process and how you apply online versus how you apply on paper. She's also going to spend a little bit of time talking about the enhanced tribal benefits for consumers who live on tribal lands. I understand that we have some representatives of the tribes and the tribal community on the call today, so we wanted to make sure that we spent some time going through how that works for you all, because the benefit for consumers on tribal lands under the Lifeline program is actually enhanced. It's more than the standard support amount. I'll get into that in a little bit. She's also going to explain to you some of the things that the FCC and USAC have done in response to the coronavirus pandemic to make it easier for consumers to sign up for the program and to also to maintain their benefits so that they don't lose connectivity as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and potentially an inability to get access to like the paperwork and the documents that they need as part of the application process, and especially consumers who are recently unemployed, who may not have ever used Lifeline before and aren't familiar with the program and need to sign up because their income circumstances have changed dramatically. And we are trying to do things to help them so that that is easier for them to get signed up. Then Katie is going to walk us through some of the resources that are available to consumers if they need help with the application process or if they want to learn more about the program. She's also going to do a live demonstration of USAC's website and then other tools that are available there so that you can see firsthand how you might go about initiating the application process. And then that will be followed at the end, as Katie mentioned earlier, by a Q&A session. And as we go throughout the presentation, feel free to ask us questions by using the questions feature over on the right-hand side of the screen. We will monitor those and then hopefully we'll address them towards the end of the presentation. So thanks for joining us, and we will move on to the next slide so I can get us started. And the next. Okay, so a lot of people ask us, who is USAC? And Katie, the organization that she represents. So we're a little bit unique, the FCC, in that I think we're unique among federal agencies in that we have designated an independent, not-for-profit organization, and that's the Universal Service Administrative Company, USAC, to administer the Lifeline program for us. They actually administer not only the Lifeline program, but all of our Universal Service Fund programs, and there are 4. Can you move to the next slide?
Okay.
Thank you. They are the High Cost Program, which is also known as the Connect America Fund, the Lifeline program, which we're going to talk to you about today, the Rural Healthcare Program, and then also the Schools and Libraries Program. All of these programs were created and USAC administers them on our behalf to make sure that people across the United States have access to broadband and voice services. What's unique about the Lifeline program in comparison to the other 3 programs is this the only one that has a direct benefit for the end user, for the consumer. The High Cost Program, that's the program that provides funding directly to communications providers to help them build out their infrastructure and provide broadband in rural high-cost areas where it's really expensive to deploy infrastructure. The Rural Healthcare Program, that's for healthcare facilities and healthcare providers so that they can provide telecommunications service that's needed to access telehealth. And then the Schools and Libraries Program, that is for schools and libraries. They receive that funding to ensure that they can provide telecommunications and broadband services for educational purposes. So let's go to the next slide, please. So for the Lifeline program, Lifeline offers a monthly discount on phone or internet service. The way it works is that all eligible consumers can receive a discount of up to $9.25 per month. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, consumers who live on qualifying tribal lands can receive enhanced support of up to $34.25. So to give you a sense of the tribal population in comparison to the overall Lifeline population, out of the approximate 7 million households that participate in Lifeline, about 274,000 of those receive the enhanced support amount. But before we leave this slide, I wanted to talk a little bit exactly about how the discount works. With respect to the standard support amount, that's the up to $9.25. The way that works is you can get $9.25 off for broadband service. If you have voice service, or if you're using your discount towards the voice service, the standard support amount is $7.25. And then, of course, the enhanced benefit for those who live on tribal lands, that's an additional $25 on top of either the $7.25 or the $9.25, depending on which service that you're applying the benefit to. It is a discount that actually gets passed through to the consumer on their bill from their communications provider. And in reality, the way it works for a lot of folks is that we have what we call, Lifeline providers. They sign up and they're designated to provide Lifeline service. Not every communications company in the United States is a Lifeline provider, but many of them are. And a lot of them have a unique product offering that's tailored to low-income individuals. And so they will price their product offering for low-income consumers to match, or at least be closely aligned with the benefit amount. So oftentimes when you sign up for Lifeline service, you actually end up getting service that's free to the end user. And then I also wanted to mention here that a lot of those providers also will offer a handset as well as part of their package. So you might hear about free phones or the ability to get free phones or discounted phones. That is up to the individual Lifeline provider, whether or not they offer a device. We don't actually subsidize the devices ourselves. The subsidy goes towards the cost of the broadband service or the phone service. And like I said, that gets passed along to the consumer through their bill. Can we move to the next slide, please? So how do you qualify for Lifeline? There are a couple of different ways. The first way is based on your income. If your income is at or below 135% of the federal poverty guidelines, or alternatively, if you can show us that you participate in at least one of the following qualifying government programs, the ones that are identified on this slide, and that is Medicaid, SNAP, Supplemental Security Income, and of course HUD's own federal public housing assistance, and then the Veterans and Survivors Pension benefit that is administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Can you move to the next slide, please? I also wanted to mention here that there are additional programs that consumers on tribal lands can use to qualify for Lifeline. If they can show us that they participate in one of the 4 programs that are shown here, that will also qualify them for the benefits, and that is the Bureau of Indian Affairs General Assistance, tribally administered TANF, Tribal Head Start, as long as they meet a minimum qualifying income standard, and then the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. So all 4 of those programs would qualify a tribal consumer or a person who lives on tribal lands for the Lifeline benefit. Before I turn it over to Katie, I wanted to mention something about those qualifying programs and how it works when you're signing up. We're actually very pleased that we have connections to databases that the qualifying programs administer. So for instance, one of our first partners that we were able to gain access to a database to was HUD. They have given us the ability to be able to confirm whether or not a person participates in their federal public housing assistance program. And so when someone applies, we would actually confer with HUD through our database connection to confirm whether or not that person is in their database. And then if they are, the person's automatically qualified for the benefit, which saves them from doing a lot of paperwork or having to submit additional qualifying documentation to prove their eligibility. So I wanted to take this opportunity to mention that, call that out, and thank HUD for their partnership, because that makes it so much easier for so many consumers to sign up for the program. So now I'm going to turn it over to Katie so that she can start walking us through the application process. Katie, can you get us started? I think she already mentioned this earlier, but just in case she didn't, she's the manager of communications for Lifeline, for the Lifeline program at USAC, the Universal Service Administrative Company, and she gives these kinds of presentations all the time, so you are in good hands. Katie, can you take it from here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Micah. And thanks again, Ben, for the HUD shout out. Shout out to HUD, as Micah mentioned, for being one of our first partners in connecting the Section 8 database for us, particularly to the PIH React team. So thank you guys. You guys are valuable partners with us. All right, so we're gonna go talk about the application. You now know you can apply through Section 8, SNAP, Medicaid, and the other programs we mentioned. So if a consumer can apply through those, how do they actually get the process started? Well, there's 4 main things that they need to do. The first thing that they need to do is submit a Lifeline application, and that is to us, to USAC. On that application, they will provide information about themselves, some core information. And then, as Micah mentioned, we run that information through our database, which does a series of checks, including against HUD, to see if they're in these eligibility programs. If they are, they don't need to give us more information. If they do, we cannot find these consumers in the database, then we're going to ask to see a little bit more information from them and have them show us proof of eligibility or proof of their date of birth, other things. So I'll get onto that more. So once they, again, fill out the application to give us any necessary proof they need to show, they will qualify for the Lifeline benefit. At that point, they will then choose a Lifeline company and then contact that company to formally enroll, one with the service provider, but most importantly with Lifeline. So I know that was a lot. I'm about to go over that again in more detail, but those are the 4 basic steps for applying and getting enrolled in the Lifeline program. So a little bit more about the National Verifier. That's the database that Micah was talking about. The National Verifier is our online application system. It checks a consumer's Lifeline eligibility. And after we run that check, they either, again, sign up for the Lifeline benefit, or we ask to see a little more information. The National Verifier application is used in all states, and that's shown here. Oregon, California, and Texas have very robust state Lifeline programs. And so in those states, we ask that you apply through the state programs. Otherwise, anyone else will be applying through us and the National Verifier. There are 3 ways, or 3 core ways to apply for Lifeline through the NV, or the National Verifier. The first one is to apply online, and the consumer can do this themselves. So they go to checklifeline.org. That is both computer and mobile friendly, and they will provide some core information about themselves and create an account, and then submit that application. The second way that they can apply, and this is very crucial to many in that participate in HUD multifamily or HUD Section 8, and that is to apply with a paper form. So a consumer who may not be completely savvy with a computer or have access to a computer or mobile device can complete a paper application. They can receive one either from downloading it online, getting it from someone who's assisting them with the application, or their service provider of choice. The consumer will then fill out that application and mail it into us, the Lifeline Support Center, where we will process that, and then hopefully they will qualify for the benefit and get enrolled. And then finally, the third option is to apply with assistance from a service provider. So if you know who you want to work with, or perhaps your consumer already has existing service with a Lifeline company, they can go to their company and sign up. They can do that in person, but some companies have an online application process for Lifeline that's linked to ours, and so they'll be able to apply online. And then I'll show you a little later in this presentation, but if you're looking or assisting a consumer in applying, they can use the Companies Near Me tool on our website to locate a Lifeline provider in their area. All right, so that was kind of the basics about how you would apply and the three main ways. I'm now going to show you what our consumer portal online looks like. So what it means to apply as a consumer through checklifeline.org, just so you're a bit familiar with it and you can assist anyone who may be curious about this or trying to apply themselves. So this is a diagram just walking through in a bit more detail the steps that I'm about to cover. First off, a consumer would visit an EnV website and they would create a user account. Once they do that, their application is almost done. They would just need to log in and select the qualifying programs that they participate in, review all of the information that they had already submitted when creating an account, and then click submit. If they are found eligible in the program, meaning that we've run that series of checks through our online database system and we find them in HUD in the Section 8 database, then we would say, great, you're qualified. And then they would be asked to read, initial, and e-sign the certification and consent statements on our form, just noting that they're about to, we're able to utilize this information to run these checks and they're fully aware of that and that they are a participant or potential participant in this program, and then they would sign up and enroll in Lifeline. If we cannot find them in the National Verifier or there's an error of some sort, meaning that we can't confirm their identity or maybe their address doesn't seem exactly right to our system, then we're gonna ask them for a little more information. And once they resolve that, again, hopefully they can qualify and enroll. But first, we need them to provide us some documentation. And they can do that either through mail or by uploading information directly into our system. So I'll walk you through that process in just a second. All right, so step one on this adventure is going to checklifeline.org. You, as a consumer, or if you're helping a consumer, you would start on the right-hand side of the screen under that green box that says, what is your state or territory? You would select that. Since I'm in DC, I would select District of Columbia and then click Get Started. I'm about to show you once you create a user account, but if you are a returning customer, you can check your status for Lifeline at any point, or if you need to submit some documentation, you would log in on the top right-hand side. So that's the red box that you're seeing there. All right, so once you click Get Started, you're immediately going to see this screen, and we are immediately going to ask the consumer for a little bit of information. As I mentioned, we ask for 4 core pieces, and this is 2 of that. So we ask for their full legal name, not their short name. So my full name is Catherine. That would be the name I would use here versus Katie, and then their last name and middle initial. And then we ask that they provide their date of birth. And then the last name must be at least 2 characters. All right, you would then scroll down and you would see what are the last 4 numbers or last 4 digits of your social security number. So you would enter that in. For folks who are in tribal communities or work with tribal consumers on the line, your tribal consumer is able to provide their tribal identification number instead of the social security number if they prefer. And then we ask finally for the consumer's address. So you can put in any standard address here, standard by USPS terms or the Postal Service. We understand that if you're homeless or if you're in a rural area, or particularly if you're tribal sometimes, that your home address might not always be fully recognized by USPS. And so we call that a descriptive address. And so we have an example of that here just for your awareness. So if you're working with a consumer who's experiencing homelessness, for example, as their address, their main address here, they could put in an intersection or note that they live under an overpass, or in this description or example here, you see red house in the middle of town, and then we ask you to provide the city, state, and zip. So once we collect these 4 pieces of information from the consumer, you're mostly there, right? This is the core information that we need to know to run the series of checks. So we ask that you click next. That will lead to them creating the account. We then ask for a username, password, and to confirm a password. And then we do ask for security questions. So we've been asked why we ask for security questions. So I wanted to kind of take a note here and talk about why. A lot of the consumers who apply through our program are elderly, disabled, or may not have an email address. Because of that, we utilize these security questions as a way for you to get into your account if you ever need to remember. If any consumer cannot remember, they can always call us at Lifeline support and we can assist, but the security questions are supposed to be a way that you can answer and get into your account without having to utilize an email address where you would, under other circumstances or with other platforms, say, I forgot my password, and then they would send you an email to reset it. So this is a different way to do that. And then we ask, finally, what is the best way to reach you? And you are able to select email, phone, or mail and enter in that information there. We then ask that they click next. All right, that's basically it. That's the 4 core pieces of information. They've created their account. They are then going to sign in. They will be asked to complete a CAPTCHA and then click sign in. This is the screen or the consumer dashboard that consumers will see upon logging in. And to submit a new application, they would click apply or transfer your service. If they have an existing application that's already pending, they would click return to application, but I'll talk on that a little bit later. So click apply or transfer your service, and then you'll see the following screen. So I mentioned we already collected the core pieces of information from them. This is the last thing we really need to know, which is tell us which program you are in. So you are able to assist the consumer in checking any of the boxes for any of the programs that they apply for or that they qualify with. So that includes, again, SNAP, Medicaid, Federal Public Housing Assistance, otherwise known as Section 8, SSI, Veterans Benefit, or any of the tribal programs that Micah mentioned. So once the consumer checks all that applies, they'll click next, and you'll see the following screen. This is where we ask the consumer to review their information before submission. Their address will be very important because that is what the service provider is going to need for them to enroll in the Lifeline program. So make sure everything is okay and accurate, and then please confirm that all of the information that you are providing as a consumer or assisting this consumer in providing may be collected, used, shared, just for the purposes of signing up for Lifeline. Then we'll click next. And then if all goes well, we'll do these initial statements in e-sign. So this is where we ask them to have an agreement. It says you're almost done qualifying. Please initial next to each. There's a series here of 9 statements. So we ask that the consumer go through each one of these and initial with their first name and last name initials in each box. And then once they get to the end, they'll be asked to enter in their signature and click submit. All right. So if the consumer walks through this process, they give us their basic information. They note which programs that they qualify through, and then do all of the initialing and click submit. If we find them in our database, if we run that check and say, okay, cool, you do qualify through HUD and we have all of your information and it appears up to date, then they will see this screen, which is you qualify for Lifeline. The consumer will then have 90 days to go to a service provider and enroll. If a service provider is assisting them, they can immediately enroll the consumer in the benefit. Otherwise, the consumer will get a letter in the mail or an email noting that they are qualified in addition to the screen, and it will discuss next steps. And as you can see here, we kind of note choose a company. We have the companies near me tool linked, and we kind of walk them through what happens next. All right, so that was what happens if a consumer immediately qualifies. And thankfully, due to the federal HUD connection and our federal connection with Medicaid, we are seeing high rates of people immediately qualify for the benefit. So it's upwards of 60% is the average nationwide. So that's really good news here. If someone needs to show a little bit more information, if they get what we call an error here, they will see a screen that shows a list of, basically says, hey, we need a little more information from you. And then it will list one of the following, which is that we may not be able to recognize your address. Someone already might be living there at that address that's receiving the Lifeline benefit. You may be under 18 and we need to see some proof that you're an emancipated minor. We might not be able to verify your identity, or we need a little help in proving your program eligibility. So you can get any one of these. I will note it's rare to, very rare to get all of them, but we're laying them out here for you so we can kind of talk about how you might resolve that. And I'm seeing some questions here about if the presentation is available. So we've, for a handout, I just want to remind you guys that there is a handout section in today's webinar. It's on the right-hand side of your screen, and the presentation is available for download. So you will be able to take this deck home with you today. All right, so our first error that we're going to talk about is an address error. And consumers who often see this are those who use a descriptive address. So that's some of our rural population. Consumers experiencing homelessness often get this error, or we need a little more information from them. Or if, again, you're on tribal lands and we just don't recognize your address. So if that occurs, you will see the following screen here with a Google map that is zoomed in as closely as possible to like the zip code, the city and state, whatever piece of information that you've entered in and as part of your descriptive address. The Google map will be zoomed in, and you will be asked to, as a consumer or as someone who's helping the consumer, to drop a pin on the map where the consumer lives. And so once you drop that pin, if you see that little pin there in the image, then you can just click next, and your address will be recorded in our system. This is particularly important, again, for those who are on tribal lands or federally recognized tribal lands. For them to receive the enhanced benefit, we do need their coordinates. So we either need to recognize their address in the system, or they need to drop a pin on the map here so we can collect that information. All right, so that sums up how you apply online. I'm now going to talk about what it's like to apply via paper form. So we have a paper form that individuals can use and fill out. You just saw me walk through what it looks like on our internet, on our application site, and all of that information is exactly the same. You're just now seeing this in the paper form or format. So consumer can get this at any point, again, from their service provider, from our website. If they call Lifeline support, we will mail them one so they can fill it out and send it in. We ask that whoever's filling out the application, preferably the consumer, write clearly using black ink in capital letters. And then again, consumers are going to enter in the same information that I just showed you. Okay, so for the other errors, at any point, whether you apply via mail or paper, you can go to our online site and upload information. So you don't have to mail it in, you can just submit it through our online site. However, If you're applying via paper, you most often, if you're getting errors, you need to resolve it via paper. So we will send you a letter noting that we need some more information from you and then asking you to submit that information to us and to Lifeline support. So that is how you would handle that on paper. I want to highlight here, because I know we have members of our tribal communities present, how to resolve errors for addressing. So if a consumer has access to the internet but does not want to submit an online application, like we just talked about, USAC recommends that they use a mapping tool or work with perhaps some of you on the call to print off a Google map and mark where they live on that map. And again, if they are tribal, please do, wherever possible, include the latitude and longitude coordinates for us to record so we can see if they're able to receive that 3425 or that enhanced benefit. A consumer may use a map also from their community. So if there's one from a gas station, phone, or internet, the consumer, we just ask that they circle where they live. And again, if the coordinates are known, please give us those and then submit to Lifeline support. Option 3 for submitting or resolving an address error via paper is that the consumer or those assisting them draw a map of where they live or where they spend the majority of their time for those who may be experiencing homelessness. And we ask that it be as detailed as possible, that it include crossroads, identifiable landmarks, and distances if possible. So this is an example of that here. And we again ask that you draw that out and then submit to our Lifeline Support Center. There are several other documents that are acceptable to resolve an AMS error that could involve showing or sending in a copy of your utility bill or the consumer's utility bill. So those are available on our website. Again, you can get that handout from the handout section. It's available for download on the right-hand side of your screen. And then you can click on that and you will be taken to our website where you can read more about the requirements around that. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, if you would like the enhanced tribal benefit of 3425, we do need to identify where you reside to see if you are eligible for that. All right, so I've been talking about the Lifeline Support Center, and I'm seeing some questions come in asking about languages. So our support center, the PO box is here. It is open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where we process applications, and we have a customer call center or care center, so you can call in and get assistance, like requesting an application for a consumer, asking with the consumer's blessing, of course, what the status of their application is and other things. So any mails, pieces of mail, any applications, any information that they need to send, please do send to this PO box in London, Kentucky that's listed here. And then the consumer will get an eligibility decision from us via mail, and it will be marked the Lifeline Support Center. Due to mail, particularly right now, we estimate that consumers should receive eligibility decisions within 7 to 10 days, and that accounts for processing and also the mailing times. And then again, Lifeline support is available from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and so you can call them at any point at 1-800-234-9473. And they do support English and Spanish, and we have application forms in both English and Spanish, as well as Spanish is supported via our online application. All right, so a couple tips with paper forms. We already talked about blue and black ink, but if consumers have access to email, we highly encourage them to enter that information in on their application. It means we will be able to email them and tell them that they are qualified for this benefit rather than just sending the physical paper, which will take a little bit of time to get there. We also suggest that if you're applying via paper, that you include copies of your eligibility letters or identity documents, as well as anything else that you might need to submit, including the one per household worksheet, otherwise known as the Independent Economic Household Worksheet. And if you give us all of those documents all at once on behalf of the consumer, then we'll be able to process their application immediately, and it will cut down on mailing time. All right, so I know I've talked a little bit about how to make this process helpful and accessible to those who may be experiencing homelessness, who are disabled, as well as those who live on federally recognized tribal lands. But I'm going to touch a little more on the enhanced tribal benefit. So again, it's $34.25 for anyone who is living or residing on federally recognized tribal lands. We do have a map on our website as well as a map within our system. So when I was mentioning those coordinates, that is what we use to determine whether a consumer is eligible for the benefit. And I will note that both Alaska in particular, counts as a federally recognized tribal land the entire state. So if you reside in Alaska and you're a tribal member, you are immediately eligible for the $34.25. All right, so here's a couple questions to ask yourself if you're working in these communities or you know consumers who may be eligible, is asking them, in addition to SNAP, in addition to Section 8, in addition to these other programs, this consumer participate in any of the programs listed here, which is BIA, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs General Assistance, TANF for the tribally administered TANF, Tribal Head Start, and then the food distribution program on Indian reservations. And then this is only for our tribal consumers, but if you are a tribal consumer and you are starting service at their address for the first time, they may be eligible for a program called Link Up. That means they may get up to $100 for starting their Lifeline service, and that's for like startup costs. And we will need to confirm with Lifeline, the Lifeline carrier of their choice that they offer Link Up and that's available. But again, for first-time users, they may be able or eligible for this program. Okay, so we've gone over the basics of how to apply and some of the ins and outs of that. I now want to touch on steps that the FCC has been taking along with USAC to make this program a little more accessible during the pandemic, during COVID-19. So we have, the FCC has released a series of waivers, and these are effective through August 31st to ensure that consumers have access to the communications that they need during this time. Key takeaways here is that we're working to continue service with those who are enrolled, even when there might be usage requirements. So Micah noted earlier that a lot of carriers offer Lifeline phones to individuals for quote unquote free. So for the cost of the benefit of $9.25. And if you do have a free phone, you are required to use that every 30 days to maintain the benefit. We call it our non-usage rule. So that is one of the things that we have waived at this time. We will not be de-enrolling anyone who does not use their phone every 30 days because we want to make sure it's there for those who need it. Additionally, as Micah also mentioned, the FCC has temporarily adjusted some income eligibility or documentation requirements to allow people who are recently unemployed to prove Lifeline eligibility. So I was a little remiss earlier. I talked a lot about the programs and how you apply. You can qualify through HUD Section 8 and those other programs, but you can also qualify through income. And so if you and your family are at 135% of the federal poverty guidelines, and we have those available on our site, but if your income is at or lower than that rate, then you are eligible for our benefit. And that's not something that our databases can check, right? I think the IRS would frown upon us potentially seeing some of that data. So we are not able to check that with our system. So we do ask that they submit documentation to us proving their income. At this time, we are now accepting letters from those who are recently unemployed from an unemployment office or some document that is showing that they are unemployed and have applied for this benefit in lieu of our standard documentation, which is 3 months of consecutive pay stubs. All right, we are also accepting driver's licenses or state ID cards that have recently expired. So if you're trying to prove your identity and that you are who you say you are with us, and we ask you to submit a driver's license, you are able to do so even if it expired in March when all of this began. And then for our rural tribal consumers, so these are tribal consumers who live in rural areas. The FCC temporarily waived its rules so that a Lifeline provider may immediately enroll a tribal consumer who lives in rural areas, and they can immediately start receiving the Lifeline benefit and then work to submit all of that documentation that I just went over today. So they would get to immediately start using their Lifeline service and then would have 45 days to submit the full application and to get qualified. And so for more information on any of those things I just touched on, we have a link here, COVID-19 response page on our website, so you can read a little more about that. All right, so I touched on a few key ways to get assistance through the Lifeline Support Center, but I wanted to share a couple more before we went more into the questions and kind of a live demo of our website here. So as I mentioned, Lifeline Support Center is available 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That is our 1-800 number here, as well as our email address, so feel free to utilize either. We will send any consumer who needs one a paper application, as well as answer questions about the program and work to get them started and provide status updates on their application. We also have a website, lifelinesupport.org, which walks consumers through the application process, talks about how to provide that extra additional information or how to resolve errors, and then has a specific tribal page. And then I mentioned this earlier, but we do have that tool, Companies Near Me, where if you qualify for Lifeline or you're curious about how to find a Lifeline provider, you can do so in their site, and I'll show you that in just a minute. All right, also on this site are consumer outreach resources. And I think this will be particularly interesting to those on the line, because these are things, or these are brochures that you can print off and that you can provide to consumers who may qualify for this benefit. They are both in English and Spanish. So I have the links here. Again, you can download the handout on the right-hand side of the screen and you'll get all the links and stuff. But we, again, have English and Spanish flyers available for download on the website. We encourage you to copy, print as many as you'd like, hand them out. You can use the language on these forms if you would like to post things on your website or send out information about Lifeline. We encourage you to use this language here. So please do make use of that and let us know, of course, if you have any feedback on it. This is going to be a glossary for you, talking about some of the terms that I referred to today. So again, that's available in the handout, but I'm going to kind of move on to our next portion of today's presentation. And so I've been sharing my screen with you. I am now going to shift to show you lifelinesupport.org so we can kind of go over what I just talked about. So 1 second while I make that transition. All right, you should all be able to see my web browser now in front of me. I'm at Lifeline Support. couple key things here. First of all, in the top right-hand section of the screen is an Apply Now button. So if you're helping a consumer and you need to get to our Check Lifeline site or to apply with the online application, they just need to click this button and they will immediately be taken to our online application form. Otherwise, we do have information about the National Verifier here, as well as our tribal page, which you see on the left-hand side, and our community outreach page. So I'm going to open that up. And this is a page of resources about the program, including the brochures or the one-pagers that I just talked about that are available for download in English and Spanish. Going back to our main page here, we have Get Lifeline talking about how you qualify, how to apply, and then if you click Find a Company here, you're going to be brought to our Companies Near Me tool. And so you're able to enter in a zip code here or your city and state, and then you can find Lifeline providers in your area. So I'm from Nebraska, so I am going to enter in one of my old zip codes. And so this is zip code for Omaha, Nebraska. And here are a list of the 6 companies that do serve this area with their information. We work to update this periodically, and we also ask that companies help us keep this updated. And you are able, if you look here, to download this information into a PDF or something like that if you need to print it or mail it for the consumers that you're working with. So that's the core thing I'm going to show you. I'm now, I guess the final thing I want is to show you is the help page, which again kind of goes through some of the things here and how to get in touch with us that I just talked about. And then I'm now going to shift it back over to our presentation, and we'll work with Micah to take some questions from the audience. So just one second. All right. So we're now in the Q&A portion. If you have questions and you have not yet asked, please do so by going to the right-hand side of our screen and then putting your question in the text box. If you participate in Section 8 housing, then you do qualify for the Lifeline program. So I'm seeing some questions around that, and I just want to clarify that yes, that is a qualifying program. Looking through here, it sounds like Gregory has a question about a consumer. So he notes that who do we get in touch with if we have a consumer we're working with and for whatever reason they can't get into their account. So Gregory, if you can email us at lifelineprogram@usac.org, we shall be able to assist you on that. Again, that's lifelineprogram@usac.org. That's for a bit more technical questions, or with people like you who are working with consumers, you can write us there. Our general email, lifelinesupport@usac.org, is for both service providers and anyone applying, and they'll also be able to receive assistance in that way. I already answered the question about the forms and the languages we support. We do support both English and Spanish at this time, but I'd be curious from you guys if there are any other common languages that you encounter in your work. And if so, feel free to drop that in the chat box, and I can always take that back to the team. I'm seeing a question of, this seems like a straightforward application process. Why is it challenging to get approved through a certain service provider? That question comes from Jen Morris. Jen, I think you used the term Lifeline contractor. So I want to note that the companies who participate in our program and receive the disbursement or the 925 for the consumer to provide service to the consumer, they are not contractors of USAC or the FCC, but they do have to do certain things to participate in this program. And if you are encountering difficulties with a certain provider, you are welcome to let us or the FCC know. So I would encourage you to write us. Again, that would be lifelineprogram@usac.org. All right, I'm going to ask Micah here. We're not in the same place, but Micah, are you seeing any questions or any things that you want to address at this time?
Thanks, Katie. Yes, I see a couple more questions here. I'm not sure we're going to have time to get to all of them because we only have about 5 minutes left. But I was going to, one of the first questions I see that popped up is, can a customer apply for phone and internet? I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that an individual household is only entitled to one discount, and it can be applied to either phone or internet service. If it's applied to the internet service, you're eligible for up to $9.25. If it's applied to the phone service, you're eligible for up to $7.25. And of course, if you're a consumer who lives on tribal lands, you could receive the enhanced benefit amount, which would be $25 on top of the standard support amount. So it's an either or situation. Looking to see if there are other questions that we haven't already addressed. I wanted to add to what Katie said earlier. If you are having issues with a particular service provider, you're obviously welcome to email USAC at lifelineprogram.usac.org. But if it's a situation where you have an individual consumer that is having problems with a service provider and they need the FCC's help, we also have a consumer complaint center that consumers can avail themselves to. And this is for situations where, like if they have a problem with their bill, or if their service accidentally gets terminated for some reason, and there's an individual resolution to that problem, then the FCC can help. And that's on the FCC's website. It's consumer complaints at consumercomplaints.fcc.gov. Is where you would go to do that. But it sounds like, based on the questions we're seeing here, that your first resort might be best to email lifelineprogram@usac.org, and then we could give you some direction from there.
Cool. I'm also seeing a question here from Sabrina, and she's asking, what if the customer already participates in the Lifeline program? Sabrina, then that's fantastic. That our job is done. But to make sure that I am understanding your whole question, I do want to note that if your consumer is enrolled in Lifeline but doesn't like their service, they can transfer their benefit at any time. So they would just need to find another Lifeline provider, which we recommend that they do through the company's Near Me tool on their website or our website. And then they would be able to work with that new provider to do a transfer. Okay, I know we're almost at time, and HUD has been so generous to us in allowing us to speak with you and kind of pulling this together. So for any closing remarks, I'd like to hand it back to HUD. Chris or Ben, are you on the line? Let me take a look. All right, I'm not seeing Chris on the line, but Ben, if you can unmute, you're welcome to give final remarks. I will be working to answer your questions through the questions box while we still have a minute or two. Okay, it looks like our HUD compatriots might not be able to unmute themselves, so apologies there. Hold on. Let me.
Hey, Katie, this is Jill Yu. I can provide closing remarks if that's okay.
Perfect. That would be lovely, Jill.
Great. Thank you so much. And apologies for that miscommunications. They did unfortunately get pulled away. Hi, everyone. This is the first time you're hearing my voice. My name is Jill Yu. I am a branch chief here with the Department of Housing and Urban Development in our place-based initiatives division. I just want to first of all thank our presenters from the Lifeline program. It was incredibly informative. This was probably one of the topics that many of our EnVision Center sites requested. However, because of the content was just so critical, especially serving our vulnerable populations, we were encouraged, and we definitely were on board with this, to promote this widely to as many of our partners across the federal government who serve similar populations. I do have one announcement that's specific to the EnVision Center sites. This is a little teaser. You should have received an invitation for another webinar, which is scheduled tomorrow, Wednesday, July 8th. It's titled COVID-19 Impact and Recovery. It will be a webinar series to assist our EnVision Center sites in carrying out operations while we live in the new normal, and continue to serve our clients and customers that we are here to serve. So anyways, just want to remind everyone that the webinar invitation will be coming from the EnVision Center at HUD.gov. And with that said, just want to again thank you to our federal partners, FCC, as well as USAC, for a wonderful webinar. And we will talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you, Micah. And thanks all of you who attended today. We really appreciate your interest in the program. And please write us at lifelineprogram@usac.org if you have any additional questions. Thanks so much for your time today, and have a great rest of your afternoon.